My name is Marlene Coyle. My mother pressed sheets at the Marbury Hotel for 31 years, and I have her hands. You can read every one of those years in them. 6 days ago, I wired $5.9 million into escrow to buy back my mother-in-law's family home. Last night, at my own kitchen counter, my husband told me I wasn't invited to his sister's wedding. He said it looking straight at me, in the voice he uses for scheduling. Mom doesn't want you there. She says you're embarrassing. Here is what nobody in that family ever bothered to learn. Money sitting in escrow has not been spent. It is in a room with a door on both sides. I said the only thing left to say, "All right." Then I washed my glass, dried it, set it upside down on the rack, and made a phone call that lasted 4 minutes. Stay with me. I'm going to tell you all of it. You should know who was standing at that counter. I run Coyle Linen and Sterile Services. Ran, I suppose, though the sign hasn't changed. 6 hospital systems across Virginia and the Carolinas. 340 employees. We do linen, yes, but the real work is sterile processing the surgical instrument trays that come to us contaminated at 11 at night and go back sealed, logged, and sterile before the first incision at 6 in the morning. 19 months ago, I sold 60% of the company to a private equity firm out of Charlotte. I kept my name on the building and my seat on the board, and I walked away from that closing table with more money than my mother earned in her entire working life, multiplied by a number I still don't like to say out loud. I want to be plain about that money. Every dollar of it has a work order behind it. Somebody's night shift, somebody's back, mine, for a long time. And then there are my hands. There is a scar on the inside of my left wrist, about the length of a thumb, silver now, steam press. In winter, my knuckles split from the bleach and stay split until April. I've been offered creams, gloves, and once, kindly, the name of a dermatologist. My mother's knuckles arrived early on my fingers. I was nearly 40 before I understood that was inheritance. I have never hidden them, not in bank meetings, not at galas, not across the table from hospital administrators asking me for 90-day terms. I learned early that people look. I decided early to let them. There's a word certain people use for money like mine, new. What they mean is that the labor is still attached, the way you'd say a fish came with the head still on. They find it a little vulgar. They also, I would learn, find it entirely spendable. I married Whitfield Ashcombe when I was 32. The Ashcombes of Richmond are a name, not a fortune. A name, which in that city is a different asset class altogether, and one they will tell you cannot be purchased. There's a pew, there's a museum wing with a plaque. There was, for 6 generations, a house on Ellwood Row with black shutters and an iron gate. Until 22 years ago, there wasn't. They never say they sold it. They say they let the house go. Passive voice, like weather. Whit is a wealth advisor. He is tall and unhurried, and he listens with his whole face. And for 9 years, he introduced me at parties as self-made. The way you'd describe a documentary you had seen, something that happened over there, to someone else, before he arrived at the theater. His mother, Corinne, has never once telephoned me. 9 years? She summons through her son, the way you'd send for a contractor and expect him to come. So, 9 years? People are going to hear 5.9 million, and that is the number they will carry out of here, because it's the loud one. I understand. It's the one that made the papers, but it isn't the number that broke anything. That house was 6 days old and still sitting in a room with 2 doors. The number that broke it was smaller and much older. And it took me 9 years. a green notebook, and one very quiet Tuesday night to finally add it up. $412,000. In checks, in roofs and tuitions and gala tables, written one at a time, cheerfully, into a family that never once put my name on anything. 5.9 million is a headline. 412,000 is a marriage. The Marbury Hotel kept its laundry in the sub-basement, and you got there in a service elevator that smelled like wet canvas. My mother worked 10 to 2, 6 nights a week, on a flatwork ironer the size of a car. Sheets went damp at one end and came out folded and hot enough to burn you. Verna Coyle, 5'3", bad knees by 40. A voice like gravel with honey poured over it. I started writing down with her at 13. Officially, I was doing homework on an upturned crate by the sorting bins. But there were napkins, thousands every night, the last thing finished and the reason a shift runs long. So I folded napkins, 200, 300. My hands moving in the same 3 motions until they stopped being motions at all. I wasn't being noble, it was arithmetic. Every 50 napkins I folded was 7 minutes after my mother got home earlier. If I was fast, she got home at 2:10 instead of 1/2. She kept a radio on the shelf above the pre-soak tank, turned so low you had to want to hear it. Steam is still the smell I associate with being loved. That probably tells you everything about how a person gets wired. She had rules, and she said them the way other mothers say prayers. Blood comes out cold, baby. She would say it holding a surgical gown up to the light, or a pillowcase off the 4th floor nobody was going to ask about. Everything else comes out hot. Don't ever get those backwards. She meant it as a technique. Hot water sets protein, cold lifts it. That was all it was, a thing you had to know to keep your job. It took me 26 years to hear the rest of what she was saying. Poverty teaches a bright girl one lesson early, and so gently she thinks she thought of it herself. You are kept where you are useful. Nobody said it to me. Nobody said it at all. I just watched. The winter I was 14, our landlady took $30 off the rent. The same month my mother started sweeping the building's stairwells on Sundays for nothing. Nobody made anything of it. My mother swept, the rent came down, and we stopped being late on the 1st. I took notes the way children take notes, which is to say without knowing I was writing anything down. Be useful enough and people will find you a corner to stand in. It isn't a bad lesson for business. I built a company on being more useful than anyone in the room, but somewhere in there the wiring crossed, and useful stopped being something I did and started being something I was. I bought my first truck at 24, a box truck with 190,000 miles and a sliding door that needed a shoulder. My first account was a dental practice off Broad Street. 11 pounds of gowns and bibs a week, $40, cash on Fridays. I did the pickups at 6 in the morning and the invoicing at my mother's kitchen table. At 30, I had 4 trucks. At 31, we took our first hospital. At 32, we won the linen contract for a conference hotel downtown, and I walked the property myself before we bid, counting rooms, weighing towels on a hanging scale. There was a man in the atrium running a client event. He watched me weigh a towel, and he laughed, not at me, at the fact of it. That was Whit Ashcombe. He asked more sincere questions about commercial laundry that evening than anyone ever has, and I talked, and he listened with his whole face. And I mistook being interesting for being wanted. His mother received me, and that is the correct verb, at her apartment on Monument Avenue. Silver service, portrait light. Corinne Ashcombe poured tea with a wrist, so the cup looked like it was pouring itself. She asked me exactly one question about my family. "And where are your people from?" I said Richmond. "Mostly." I said my mother had run a flatwork ironer at the Marbury Hotel for 31 years, because I do not launder my mother for anybody's parlor. Corinne's smile did not move. Nothing about her moved. She set the question down like a fish knife she wouldn't be needing, and began talking about the museum's restoration fund. Here is the part to hold on to, because I didn't understand it for another 9 years. When she reached for the sugar tongs, her sleeve slid back. On the inside of her left forearm, near the elbow, there was a scar about the length of a thumb, gone silver with age. She caught me looking. She turned her wrist over, then she turned it back and finished her sentence about the museum. "Emmett Hale has been my attorney since I was 26, when a linen company with 4 trucks did not need an attorney, and I hired one anyway." 6 weeks before the wedding, he set a folder on the table between us. Premarital agreement, 19 pages. I pushed it back across the table. I want to be careful here, because this is where people would like me to have been a victim. And I wasn't. Not yet. Nobody forced anything on me. The Ashcombs never asked for a prenuptial either. It did not occur to them that the risk in this merger might run in my direction. The name was the asset. I was the liquidity. But I am the one who pushed the folder back. I had read 1,000 contracts by then. I knew exactly what I was declining. "I'm not asking you to distrust him," Emmett said. "I'm asking you to write down what's already true. If I hand him this, I'm telling him I already know how it ends." He didn't argue. That is the thing about Emmett. He looked at me for a moment, then put the folder in his desk drawer and closed it. "Then keep everything separate," he said. "Separate isn't something you are, Marlene. It's something you do. Every month. Forever." He kept that folder in that drawer for 9 years. I know, because I saw it again. Now let me tell you about a Tuesday in my 4th year of marriage, because people will hear the rest of this and decide I was a fool, and I would like the record complete. A hospital system down in Tidewater, $3.1 million a year, our second largest account, renewal meeting, 9 people at the table. Their new vice president of supply chain wanted 2 things: 90-day terms instead of 30, and 4 sterile processing cycles a year at no charge, roughly $200,000 of labor. He had a word ready for it, a goodwill gesture, partnership. I let him finish. I have never once interrupted a man talking himself into a worse position. Then I closed the folder in front of me, said thank you, said we would be glad to bid again in 2 years, and walked out, 90 seconds, start to finish. I did not raise my voice. I have never had to. In the parking garage, Yolanda Reyes, who has run my operations for 13 years, said, "That is the fastest I have ever seen anybody kill $3 million. They didn't want a vendor," I said. "They wanted me to be grateful. Grateful is a discount, and I don't give it." 4 days later, Thursday night, Whit sat on the edge of our bed, turning his phone over in his hands, like a boy holding a bad report card. The roof of the Ashcombe family hall had failed. $46,000. His mother had called him twice that day. "I'll handle it," I said. I want to be precise about the timing, because I have thought about it a great deal since. From the moment he said the number to the moment I capped the pen, 11 seconds, I did not ask to see an estimate. I did not ask why a family with a pew and a museum wing could not repair its own roof. The relief on his face paid me better than any thank you ever has. That is the part I need you to understand. It was never the money. It was watching him stop being worried. Yolanda found out the way she finds out everything, which is that she reconciles my accounts. She didn't lecture me. She set a coffee down on the corner of my desk, one she carries all day, and I have never once seen her drink. And she said, "You've got 2 signatures. Marlene, one of them costs a whole lot more than the other." Then she went back to work. That same week, down on the nightline, Dom Peralta was running 3rd shift the way he had for 6 years, which is to say better than anyone ran days. Dom has a cousin, Nestor, tunes church organs, travels the whole mid-Atlantic doing it. Boss lady, still got that cousin. Dom, I'm married. I know. He kept loading trays. I'm playing the long game. That was the only time I laughed that week. And I wanted on the record that the laugh came from a loading dock and not from anywhere inside that house. Sunday, on the church steps, Corinne looked past me, not through me, past me, at a woman behind my shoulder, whose name she said warmly. In the car, Whit put his hand on my knee. "She's just like that. Let's not make a production of it." I said, "Okay." I said okay for 9 years. The Ashcombs eat Sunday dinner at 2 o'clock, 12 at the table, under a chandelier older than my hometown. That particular Sunday was the spring of my 9th year. Sloan had gotten engaged 3 weeks before, to a faircloth, which in Richmond is roughly a ribbon marrying a flag, and the ring was the reason everybody had come. It was on her hand, where it belonged, but at a table like that, a ring is a public document, and it gets read. Her aunt asked to see it, so Sloan worked it off over the knuckle, and it went around, hand to hand, the way a hymnal goes down a pew. It came to me. I did what you do. Held it up, turned it toward the window, said something true about the setting, passed it left, and my hands did what hands do, which exists. Whit's uncle, Bootsy, 68, 3 glasses of Sancerre into the afternoon, watched my fingers close around that ring and said, kindly, to the whole table, "Well, those have been through it, haven't they? Here is the thing I need you to understand, and it is the reason I have told this so slowly. It was not a cruel laugh. It was worse than cruel. It was comfortable. It was the laugh of people confirming something they had all agreed on years ago and were pleased to find still true. The way you laugh at a joke about the weather." Corinne smiled into her tea. Sloan said, "Oh, stop," in the voice that means keep going. And my husband laughed too, not loudly, just enough. I looked down at my own hands on the edge of that tablecloth, the scar at the wrist, the knuckles that split every winter and come back every April, my mother's joints, arriving early. And I did something I had never done at that table. I started to slide them into my lap. I made it about halfway. Then a 13-year-old in a sub-basement 2 floors under a hotel lobby reached up and took the wheel. And I brought my hands back and laid them flat on that white cloth, both of them, palms down, scars up. I left them there through dessert. There was a pecan tart. I don't remember eating it. I remember the cloth was damask and cool, and that my palms left 2 faint prints on it that dried and vanished while I watched. Nobody said another word about them. It is the proudest small thing I have ever done. It cost nothing, and it changed nothing, and I would do it again tomorrow. In the car, Whit waited until we were past the gate. "Bootsy's harmless. I know what Bootsy is. So let's not make a production of it." He said it with an edge that hadn't been there on the church steps years before. That is an interesting thing about that sentence. Say it often enough, and it stops being comfort and becomes instruction. 6 weeks later, the Preservation Society Gala. I had underwritten the flowers and the quartet, quietly, the way they preferred it. A woman I had sat beside on 2 committees put her hand on my forearm and asked, in the warmest voice you have ever heard, whether it was terribly difficult, managing that sort of labor. I set my glass down on the table. Dom Peralta runs my overnight sterile line. 11 years. He can turn 6,000 pounds of contaminated hospital linen by 6A Bant M and have every tray sealed before the first surgery. Last year, he made $94,000. I let that sit for exactly 1 beat. "What are you doing?" She laughed the way people laugh when they've stepped on a rake, and said something about the auction table, and went to find it. Corinne was standing 10 feet away with her back half turned, holding a champagne flute she had not touched. She heard all of it. I have thought about that moment more than almost any other in 9 years, because I had it backward the entire time. I assumed she was embarrassed by me that night. She wasn't. She was frightened of me. Not because I came out of the laundry. She could have managed a woman who came out of a laundry. Richmond has always kept a place for those women, and the place is quiet and grateful, and near the back of the room. What she could not manage, what I do not believe she had ever once seen up close, was a woman out of a laundry who refused to be ashamed of it in a room that required her to be. That was the night. That is where it turned, and neither of us said a word about it for another 1.5 years. Every family keeps a wound and dresses it daily. The Ashcombe wound has an address. Ellwood Row, 6 generations, until Whit's father discovered that a name cannot actually be pledged as collateral and the debts came due. Whit was 22, Sloane was 9. We let the house go. They say, passive voice. Like something that happened to the family instead of something the family did. Corinne moved to the apartment on Monument and hung the portraits closer together so the walls would look full. Every Sunday, walking home from church, she goes past that gate. She does not slow and she does not look, chin level the whole way, the way you walk past somebody you still love. Here is the detail I noticed my first year and didn't understand until my last. In her apartment, in the back hall by the linen closet, there is a moving box, the tape gone amber and brittle. It has never been opened. You can see that from across the room. It is labeled in her own handwriting, in a hand younger and far less careful than the one she signs checks with. A single word I could never read from the doorway. 22 years. That box. 9 of them with me walking past it. Nobody ever mentioned it. Not Whit, not Sloane, not Corinne. Last spring, the house came on the market. $5.9 million. And Corinne Ashcombe, a woman who had never once telephoned me, invited me to tea, just the 2 of us. She asked after my mother's knees. She used my first name 4 times in an hour. She was warm the way March is warm, which is warm enough to fool anyone cold long enough. I sat in that parlor knowing to the decimal what the warmth was for. That is the confession this whole thing turns on. It worked anyway. There is a second half I did not see until the divorce disclosures. Whit ran the campaign for a year, and ran it well, because persuading people to move money is literally his profession. What I did not know was that he needed me to move mine. When I sold 60% of the company, the proceeds landed at a firm in Charlotte that was not his. His book had been flat 3 years running. A colleague had a phrase for it. I wasn't meant to hear the man, married to the largest balance in the room and unable to touch $1 of it. A purchase like that is not a gift. It is a movement. It takes an entity, a lending relationship, a rate. Every piece carries a fee, and every fee carries a name. He was not lying about loving his mother. Both things were true at once. He never had to choose, and that is exactly how the most expensive year of my life got sold to me. The closing argument came in the dark, where he always did his best work. "After this," he said, "nobody in that family will ever be able to say you're not one of us." I lay there beside 9 years of wanting that sentence to be true. Yolanda put her coffee down when I told her. In 13 years, I had never seen her put it down. "You're not buying a house," she said. "You're buying a chair. Chairs like that come with a bill every month." I told her I had structured it so that couldn't happen. Yolanda looked at me. "I'm not talking about the deed," she said. "I've read the deed." Then she picked the coffee back up and went to run my company. I proceeded anyway. Knowing your weakness and being free of it are two different net worths. But I proceeded on my way. Coyle Holdings on the title. Corinne would have the house for life through a $1 a year lease. So the tax people would call it what it was and not a gift. Her furniture, her portraits, her garden, her nameplate, everything except a deed. Emmett insisted on one more thing, a 30-day diligence window, terminable by the buyer for any reason or none, in exchange for a $180,000 non-refundable option fee. I initiated it the way you buckle a seatbelt in a parking lot. Routine, faintly silly, certainly unnecessary. Whit agreed to every term inside of a day. He agreed so fast it should have told me something. Honestly, it did. I filed it where I filed everything else. The wire went out Tuesday morning at 10. 5.9 million. My account to escrow. Closing set for the second week of July. 2 weeks after Sloane's wedding. So the family could announce the homecoming at the height of the season. I watched the confirmation load. Yolanda watched me from the doorway, saying nothing at industrial volume. Remember that it was a Tuesday. Tuesday night I couldn't sleep. Don't worry, altitude. You don't move a number like that and feel nothing. Around midnight, I opened the safe and took out the green notebook, kept since I was 24. Every personal outlay is over $500, entered by hand, because my mother taught me you don't know a number until you write it. Most pages are boring. A roof, a transmission for Dom's truck. Then came the Ashcombe pages, and I read them the way I'd read a stranger's books. Hall roof, $46,000. Sloane's tuition, $118,000. Cemetery restoration, $27,500, which I am apparently alone in finding funny. Graves. I landscaped for people who'd not have let my mother in the door. Galas. Witt's car, at the bottom. In ink from that morning. 5,900,000. I had thought of it as a love letter in the only dialect I speak fluently. Read cold. A different document looked back. Deposits, recurring, payments, scheduled, consideration given in exchange for. And the column went blank, because I couldn't prove delivery. Any auditor will tell you what a book like that is. It isn't a diary. I closed it and went to bed. 3 days later, my husband said the words for me. The invitations went out that week. Creamstock, gold foil, a calligrapher in Charlottesville with a 9-month waiting list. Every recipient posted theirs like credentials. Wednesday bills, a seed catalog, Thursday a bank statement, and a flyer misspelling my street. I stood at my mailbox in the low gold light and gave that empty box every explanation in stock. Whit took it to the office. I texted Sloane a warm congratulations. Gorgeous suite. Saw it online. Heart. The message went red. Then nothing for 2 days. From a girl whose thank you notes used to arrive before you'd handed over the gift, I told Yolanda at Friday lunch, breezy, a funny nothing. She didn't laugh. She looked at me across her salad, 13 years of my books behind her eyes. Ask him tonight. You have never once been afraid of a number. Don't start with this one. It's a small question. Where's my invitation? You can carry a small question all day. It's the answer that needs somewhere to sit. Friday, 6:40. My kitchen. I can tell you where everything was. Wit at the island in rolled shirt sleeves. Opening a Pinot I'd been saving. He liked good bottles on Fridays. I never audited the reasoning. Me at the counter with the mail. One more day of nothing, I asked lightly, giving him every off-ramp. Sloane's invitations are all over the internet, and ours hasn't turned up. Should I shake down the mail carrier? He took none. He set down the corkscrew and looked me in the eye, unlike his mother, face forward. There's no invitation coming. Marlene, Mom doesn't want you there. She says you're embarrassing. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a sprinkler ticked its circle. 72 hours, said the arithmetical part of my brain that has made me a lot of money. 72 hours since the wire. He was still talking. It's one afternoon. It's her day. Mom wants it smooth. Let's not make a production of it. 9 years. $412,000 of productions. And the sum of it stood in my kitchen in rolled sleeves, asking me not to make one. All right, I said. Then I washed my glass, dried it, set it upside down on the rack. Blood comes out cold. Baby. 7:35. Emmett Hale answers his phone on Friday evenings. I pay him for that. The call lasted 4 minutes. He asked one question, the one he's paid to ask. You're sure? I looked at the bottom line and gave the answer I should have given 9 years earlier. I have never been more sure of a number in my life. Terminate the purchase. We were inside the diligence window the buyer could walk for any reason. At the cost of a $180,000 option fee, I approved it and made the truest joke of my life. That's the cheapest invoice that my family has ever sent me. Notices went out that night to the seller's attorney, the escrow agent, and a broker whose commission evaporated between dinner and the news. People imagine this as fire. I understand the appeal, but fire spreads and gets photographed. What I did was closer to plumbing. I found the one valve feeding the whole fantasy and turned it a 1/4 inch. Somewhere across town, a fountain went dry without a sound. Then I went to bed at 10 and slept 8 hours, better than I had in years, in my own house, in my own name, beside a man who slept fine. He did not yet know the world had moved. The weekend was almost tender. The way last weekend are, Whit believed the thing had not been made a thing, and it made him light. Sunday he laid out his suit and asked which tie. I said blue. Then, in the same easy voice, if anyone at the office asks why you're not coming, just say work. His mother's catechism, secondhand, through the mouth of the man who promised to love me. All right, I said, and he kissed my forehead like a stamp on a processed form. The bomb went off at 11:40 Tuesday morning. 11 days before the wedding, I was walking on the hospital floor when my phone began to play. When a contract dies, a field in the listing service flips from under contract to active, a database row, not an announcement, but every broker in Richmond kept an alert on that house, and one called Corinne with condolences. Within the hour, my screen was a casualty report. 11 missed calls from Whit, 2 from Sloane, who never answered my note about her wedding, but found her dialing speed now. 1 number I didn't know. Corinne. The first time in 9 years she dialed my telephone herself was the day the fountain went dry. I let them ring. Then a woman from the hospital foundation sent me a link with no message, which in Richmond is a message. A society column, published 10 days earlier. Corinne Ashcombe returns to Ellwood Row, a photograph of her at the gate, chin level, finally slowing down, and one sentence I have not stopped hearing since. Mrs. Ashcombe has purchased the property herself, quietly, over the past year, herself, quietly. Not one word about a daughter-in-law, not one word about a wire, or a woman whose mother pressed sheets 31 years ago. I sat down in a crate in a corridor that smelled like steam and bleach, like my childhood, and finally understood Friday. For 4 days, I had believed I was disinvited for being embarrassing. My hands, my mother, my vowels, that was not it. 200 people would be in that room Saturday. Everyone had read that column. They would congratulate her and ask how she managed it. Exactly one person alive could have answered honestly. I was not excluded because I was an embarrassment. I was excluded because I was evidence. I took Whit's 12th call, holding the phone away from my ear while he asked at volume what I had done. I waited for the fizz to settle, then gave him back his own vocabulary in the voice he uses for scheduling. It's one house, Whit. It's money stuff. Let's not make a production of it. The silence on that line was the most honest conversation our marriage ever had. Then I hung up, finished my floor, and bought my crew lunch. He came home that evening and auditioned every voice he owned. Anger, I had humiliated his mother, bargaining wire it back, just until after the wedding. Then the victim. The most sincere he'd been all decade, did I know what it was like at 22 to watch your family lose the last thing it had. Then blame, I had known what this family was when I married. I let the performance finish. Then asked the only question I had. When your mother called me an embarrassment and you stood in this kitchen and delivered it, where were you standing, Whit? In here with me, or out there with them, he opened his mouth, and I watched the answer arrive in his face a full second before any words could get dressed, the way truth outruns its clothes. He had been standing where he always stood, wherever it was smoothest. Richmond is a beautiful machine, and that week I watched it run in reverse. The Preservation Society discovered, regretfully, a restructuring of its funded seats. The Heritage League ran an unsigned essay about the difference between giving from love of tradition and giving as a transaction. 2 couples went quiet as closed pools. What I did not expect was the rest. The hospital foundation asked me to chair. The university renewed early. I had not lost a city. I had lost 1 floor of it. What I did in response is the part I'm proudest of, and it is a list of nothing. I gave no interview, wrote no post, corrected no story at no dinner party. I let every version of me they invented walk the streets unchaperoned. All I did was open the file of recurring pledges that had been auto-renewing my way into their world for 9 years. I turned off auto-renewing, not canceled, just not renewed, each one as it came due. Like leaves deciding it's October, I did not take my money out of Richmond. I stopped subscribing to the people in it who had unsubscribed from me. The Thursday after the column ran, Yolanda came into my office with her coffee and did not sit down. She has had a cup in her hand for 13 years. I have never seen her drink from one. I used to think it was a prop. I think now it was something to hold. I need to say something, she said. Then I'm going to go run your 3rd shift. When you sold 60%, she said, I got a check. I remembered. It was the largest single check I have ever written to a human being, and I felt something like grace signing it. It was a good check, she said. I put a roof on my mother's house and 2 years of school behind my son. I'm not here to complain about a check. She set the coffee on the corner of my desk. 13 years. Marlene, I asked you once, 4 years ago, about equity. You said you'd think about it, then you never thought about it. Here is what I need to be exact about, because I have spent this whole story teaching you how I hear. I did not hear an employee asking for a raise. I heard myself at a kitchen counter, holding a wine glass I had paid for, being told to be grateful for the arrangement. You wrote me a check, Yolanda said, not unkindly. That is exactly what they do to you. I stood in my own office. The woman who had killed a $5.9 million purchase 11 days earlier because a family took my money and would not give me a chair. And I understood that I had been running the same machine one floor down, warmer, better paid, the same machine. I said 3 words. I did that. Yolanda picked up her coffee and went to run my 3rd shift. Saturday. I drove upstate with a folder. I had a plan for my mother, the same one I have presented, by my count, 9 times, sell the house with the stairs, 1 level, somebody in twice a week. I had priced 3. She let me finish. She always lets me finish. Then she put her spoon down on the saucer. No, baby, Mama, you keep trying to retire me. She wasn't angry. That is the thing. Nobody retires a person. You take away the one thing they're good at, and you call it a present. I said something about her knees. She said something about her knees being hers. Then she said something I did not understand for another week. You can't press the shirt you're still wearing. Baby, take it off first, then we'll see what it is. I drove home certain she meant the marriage. She did. She meant something else too. And it took a Thursday and a name to hear it. The summons came that Thursday, 4 o'clock. The second time in 9 years she initiated anything with me, and both times an 8-figure house was attached. Silver service, portrait light, that wrist. She opened with revision. There had been, she said, a misunderstanding. Embarrassing was Sloane's words. Spoken under stress, never hers. Then she went to the actual agenda. And I will say this for Corinne Ashcombe when commerce is on the table. The woman does not blink. Restore the purchase, and she would personally see to it that I had a proper place in this family at last. I set my cup down. Where are your people from? Corinne. She did not blink. She lifted the pot and poured. Richmond, dear, where else? Her sleeve slid back an inch. And I looked at the scar. That night, I called my mother and asked about the Marbury in the 80s. She didn't have to think about it. Corinne Boyd, number 3 press, 3rd shift, 84. I sat down on my kitchen floor. Fastest hands on the floor. My mother said, quiet, kept a paperback in her locker, quit in the spring of 85 to get married. And everybody chipped in for a card. Boyd, I said. Boyd, little town out past Ashland. Her daddy hauled gravel. I asked about the arm. My mother went quiet for a moment, then said she was there. Steam valve on number 3. A bad gasket 2 people had already written up. Corinne took it across the forearm, went to the clinic, came back and finished her shift. Because the shift doesn't finish itself. 2 women, 1 laundry, one of them kept her name, the other sanded hers off, seam by seam, for 40 years. And then held the sandpaper for the next girl who walked in with hands like that. He set it on the island like a peace treaty. Mom changed her mind. You're invited, then, in the gentlest Ashcombe voice you have ever heard. The invoice. And if you call Emmett today about the house, everything's whole again. Isn't that what we both want? Whole again. I didn't pick it up. I looked at it in the light. The ink was dry. Not this morning dry, 3 weeks dry, flat and matte the way calligraphy ink goes with time. The cardstock had a cup to it, the way heavy paper does in a drawer. I know paper. Paper is only fabric that gives up. This was written with the other 200, I said. Your mother didn't change her mind. Wit, your mother opened a drawer. I told him to give me a minute and went to the safe. Here is the detail that is the whole marriage. He thought I was getting the checkbook. What I brought back was a green notebook and a folder. I set it on the marble, opened it to the ashcombe pages, and slid it across. Read it, and he did. I watched my husband meet 9 years of my own handwriting, with dates. The hall roof, Sloane's tuition, the galas, the car he'd driven to work that morning. At the bottom, underlined once $412,000. His face did something I'd never seen it do. It stopped being composed. I used to think this was a love letter, I said. Your mother taught me what it is. It's a rent ledger. Wit, 9 years. I rented a seat in your family and paid on the 1st of every month, in the only currency your people ever took. I set the folder beside it. The petition, signed and dated. On top, his own pen. It's out! He picked up the envelope and held it out. Gold foil flashing. 9 years of wanting. An arm's length from my hand, I looked at it, and felt the girl in the sub-basement look at it. And I put both hands flat on my own counter, palms up, scars and split knuckles, and left them. That seat's off the market. The woman who was paying for it retired this morning. He stood there a moment, envelope in one hand, ledger in the other. Then he checked his watch. He was due at the club. That was the eulogy. Monday. I mailed an envelope, not to wit. Inside was a photograph printed on Carey Street, Marbury Hotel laundry staff, 1984. Second row, left, a girl of 23 with a chin like a verdict, no letter. I could have told 200 people at that wedding, or the magazine that called. I didn't. I want to be precise, because this is not a story about being nice. Corinne spent 40 years being told what she was worth by people who had it wrong. What she never got was the choice of when to open the box, so I sent it, and I let it be hers. Virginia gives you no fast way out. 6 months of separation, minimum. We signed the property agreement in 4 weeks. Nothing to fight over. One party had spent 9 years refusing to blur a line. The decree came on day 183. I have never minded a term I set myself. Witt did try. His attorney filed for a valuation of the business, claiming a share of 9 years of growth. Corinne made him withdraw it, because discovery would have put all $412,000 into the public record, searchable, readable by everyone who congratulated her at that gate. They didn't settle because your file was strong, Emmett said. They settled because losing meant being known. The same week I filed, Yolanda signed for equity. I didn't promote her. I stopped renting her. The lapsed pledges became something else that spring. The Verna Coyle Fund scholarships for the children of laundry workers, custodians, and sterile techs. We bought the old Marbury Laundry Building, empty for 9 years. It's our office now. A reporter asked what the endowment totaled. We don't discuss numbers, I said, hearing Corinne's voice in my own mouth, and laughed harder than I had in a year. Last week, I found Dom on the dock. Dom, tell me about your cousin. He didn't look up. Organs, church organs. He travels. Very calm hands, boss. At dusk, my mother and I closed the office. 66, bad knees, a spine like rebar, doing the front windows herself because she trusts nobody's streaks. So we did them together, her inside, me outside, Matching hands on matching glass, the radio low, exactly the way it went 30 years ago. Except the name on the door is ours. She would not sit down. And this time her daughter did not ask her to. Here is the only wisdom I have. It cost 9 years, so take it free. Anywhere that only prices what you can pay will invoice you forever, and the people who love you for free are the only ones you can never pay back. That's the whole thing. One empty mailbox, one green notebook, and a chair I finally stopped renting. So tell me in the comments, and be honest, because I read every single one. Have you ever been paying for a seat somewhere? In money, in silence, in pieces of yourself. Say it here. This is a good place to say it. And if you have ever been made to feel small for having working hands, type blood comes out cold, and I'll know. Share this with someone who gives too much. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time.